Ilara Vance, known to the deployment community as Ellie, didn't notice the canary yellow notice until the morning of her third missed call from Afghanistan. The humid North Carolina air, thick with the scent of pine and freshly cut grass, a scent mandated by the HOA, no doubt, pressed against the large bay windows of her home in the preserve at Willow Creek. She was operating on 3 hours of fractured sleep, fueled by a single cold cup of coffee and the lingering anxiety that always accompanied the news blackout after a major operation. She was wearing her standard uniform, ratty gym shorts, a faded Semper Fi t-shirt, and the tired, determined expression of a mother attempting to wrangle a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old into semi-presentable attire before the neighborhood carpool arrived. It was her eldest, Leo, who spotted the paper. "Mommy, what's that weird sign on the door?" Ellie peeled the official notice from the paint, her brow furrowing instantly at the bold, all-caps header, final violation. Notice, unauthorized auxiliary structure. Her mind immediately went to the innocuous 4-foot by 4-foot storage locker tucked neatly against the side of the house, invisible from the street thanks to the thick required landscaping. It wasn't a permanent shed. It was a heavy-duty resin cabinet, purchased specifically to hold the endless overflow of military-mandated gear, deployment boxes, and the extra security supplies that felt less crazy when your husband was an ocean away. It was a lifeline of temporary necessary clutter. The notice detailed the violation with agonizing specificity. Section 312B, exterior fixtures and appurtenances. All auxiliary structures, temporary or permanent, must be pre-approved by the Architectural Review Board, ARB. Ellie almost laughed. The ARB, run by Beverly Sterling. Bev, as she preferred to be called, despite being the least approachable person in the entire zip code. Bev was the neighborhood's self-appointed sovereign, a woman whose life seemed dedicated to upholding property values through the ruthless suppression of anything that resembled individual human existence. Ellie's laugh died when she saw the penalty box. Immediate fine, $500. Escalation fee, $1,500. Total due in 7 days, $2,000. A knot of ice formed in Ellie's stomach. $2,000 wasn't pocket change. It was a month's worth of daycare and groceries, money earmarked for a necessary but expensive repair on their only family vehicle. She crumpled the paper, then immediately smoothed it out, the Marine wife conditioning taking over. Panic was weakness. Documentation was power. She picked up the phone. She didn't call the general HOA line. She called the direct number listed for the ARB liaison, Beverly Sterling. The phone rang twice before a voice, crisp and utterly devoid of warmth, answered. "Architectural Review Board, this is Beverly." "Beverly, this is Ilara Vance at 1420 Azalea Way. I just received a violation notice regarding the resin storage cabinet on the side of my house." Ellie kept her voice even, professional, and entirely calm. "The key to dealing with bureaucracy was never to let them hear you sweat." "Ah, Mrs. Vance," Bev replied, the tone suggesting she was talking to a particularly persistent pest. "Yes, the shed. It's unapproved. You failed to file the requisite Form ARB 34B for temporary exterior utility structures. The cabinet is temporary." "Bev, my husband is deployed, and it's essential for storing military equipment and preparation materials that cannot be kept indoors due to regulation. It's fully screened from the street by the Leyland cypress you yourself mandated." Bev clicked her tongue, the sound sharp and irritating over the line. "The nature of your husband's employment, while commendable, does not exempt you from the covenants you signed. Furthermore, the cypress screen is a regulation, not a solution to your violation. You have not complied. The fine stands." "I understand the rule," Ellie pushed back, her grip tightening on the phone. "But I am asking for a simple temporary waiver based on hardship. I can submit the form today, retroactively. Can you waive the escalation fee?" "A waiver?" Bev's voice rose slightly, betraying a flicker of offended pride. "Mrs. Vance, I personally drove past your property yesterday, and that thing is a blight. You military wives always think you deserve special treatment. You are disturbing the aesthetic harmony of the preserve. You military wives." The phrase landed like a cheap shot designed to wound. Ellie felt a dangerous heat rush to her face. She took a slow, deliberate breath. This was no longer about a shed. Beverly, Ellie said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerously quiet. That thing contains equipment that keeps my husband alive in a combat zone. You have exactly 48 hours to retract that escalation fee and approve the structure retroactively, or I will file a formal grievance with the full board on the grounds of targeted harassment and military spouse discrimination. There was a silence on the other end, heavy and stunned. Ellie had violated the cardinal rule of interacting with Bev, never threaten the Queen. When Bev finally spoke, her voice was low, furious, and dripping with venom. Mrs. Vance, I've just consulted the records. For your refusal to cooperate and the thinly veiled threat, I am amending the violation. The structure must be removed immediately. The total accrued fine is now $5,000, and I'm personally scheduling a board hearing to levy a penalty lien on your property. The line went dead. Ellie stared at her phone, the cold resolution replacing the heat of anger. $5,000, a lien. That was an act of war. Bev had just fired the first shot, and it was a direct hit below the waterline. Chapter 2. The enemy's playbook. Ellie spent the rest of the day in a state of hyper-focused calm. The children were dropped off at school and daycare. She ignored the mountain of laundry and the unread messages from her command family readiness group. Instead, she retreated to the one place she felt truly in control, her small, organized home office, a space built for managing military deployment logistics. She pulled out the original binder of the Preserve at Willow Creek's Declaration of Covenants, Conditions and Restrictions, the CCNRs. It was the HOA equivalent of a military codebook. All right, Bev, Ellie muttered, flipping past the glossy photos of happy, compliant neighbors. You want to play bureaucracy? Let's play. She didn't just skim. She indexed. She was looking for leverage, a counter-violation, or a procedural error. Bev was arrogant. Arrogance led to mistakes. The CCNRs were a dense, 200-page monument to petty control. Section 312, B. Exterior fixtures, the shed rule. Section 407, acceptable landscape. Additions. Section 501, holiday and seasonal displays. It was in Section 501 that Ellie found a small, almost invisible crack in the fortress. The rule stated that holiday lighting and decorations must be removed no later than 14 days following the observance of the holiday. Simple enough. But Bev's house, 3 streets over, was notorious for its spectacular, borderline offensive Christmas display. Bev always left the complex, commercial-grade, permanent lighting system, the kind that required professional installation and maintenance, up until early March. Ellie checked the date on her laptop. September 30th. 6 months since the last acceptable removal date. She found the specific language, permanent. Affixed lighting fixtures not solely intended for ambient walkway or dwelling illumination, and whose primary function is seasonal decoration, shall be removed by January 15th of the following year. Violation carries a daily compounding fine of $50 starting on January 16th. Ellie didn't reach for a calculator yet. She kept reading. Bev had escalated this to a lien, a serious threat to her family's housing security. A lien meant the HOA could essentially force a foreclosure to recover the $5,000 fine. Ellie's retaliatory action had to be immediate, proportional, and perfectly legal. She found another potential error in Section 407. It detailed the type of mature trees that required ARB approval for removal. A few months ago, Bev had famously hosted a tree removal party to take down a massive, ailing oak tree that was threatening her gazebo. Ellie remembered the local news coverage. The tree was clearly historic and landmarked by the county. Ellie checked the county records online. No ARB approval on file for the Sterling Properties tree removal. Furthermore, the CCNRs explicitly required 3 notarized board member signatures for the removal of any Class 3 hardwood. Bev was the president, but she wasn't the entire board. She had acted unilaterally. Ellie leaned back in her chair, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across her face. Bev hadn't just fired the first shot. She had given Ellie the coordinates to the ammo depot. Chapter 3. The board meeting request. The next morning, Ellie executed Phase 1. She didn't move the shed. She meticulously documented the shed from every conceivable angle, attaching the photos to a perfectly formatted, 4-page document titled, Request for Emergency Hearing and Petition for Reversal of Fine and Line Threat. 1420 Azalea Way. The petition was clinical, citing improper fine escalation, citing the specific CC&R clause that required a 15-day cure period before any fine could be escalated beyond the initial tier. Bev had violated the waiting period. Targeted harassment, including a transcript based on Ellie's meticulous notes of Bev's military wives comment, framed as a clear violation of the association's non-discrimination policy. Procedural overreach, detailing the illegal lien threat without a full board vote. As required by Section 1003A, she bundled the petition with a separate, single-page certified letter addressed to the entire HOA board, not Beverly Sterling, HOA president of the preserve at Willow Creek, was accustomed to being obeyed. Her morning ritual was a tour of her domain, confirming the geometric precision of her neighbor's hedges and the appropriately neutral tones of their vinyl siding. It was a pleasant validation of her superior taste and authority. This morning, the ritual was destroyed. As her pearl-white Lexus turned onto Azalea Way, she stopped dead in the street, forcing the carpool traffic behind her to brake sharply. Her eyes narrowed to venomous slits, fixing on Alara Vance's driveway. The storage cabinet, which Bev had proudly threatened to confiscate, was gone from the side of the house. Good, she thought, a fleeting sense of victory. Then she saw it. Centered like a monument to defiance in the middle of the perfectly acceptable driveway was the cabinet, now draped in a professionally printed Marine Corps red banner. The text, stark and unforgiving, was visible for a quarter mile. This storage unit is necessary for the storage of U.S. Marine Corps deployment equipment while gunnery. Sergeant R. Vance is serving his country overseas. It has been deemed a blight by HOA. President Beverly Sterling. Total. Fine levied to date, $5,000. Threat of foreclosure issued on 9/30/25. Rules for thee, but not for me. Ask the HOA why their violations go unpunished. A minivan behind her honked. Bev ignored it. She felt a cold, hard panic clench her stomach. This wasn't a petty violation. This was a public shaming, a declaration of war using the most sacred symbols of the community. Military service and financial solvency. She drove past, her foot heavy on the accelerator, her composure shattering. She pulled into her own 3-car garage, slamming the door before she even put the car in park. She reached for her phone, hands shaking, and scrolled straight to the Facebook group. The post had gone viral within their small, gated world. There were over 200 comments, most of them viciously aimed at her. Ellie's carefully worded post, framing the issue not as her problem, but as a transparency issue involving the board's own financial delinquency, had ignited a wildfire. Bev scrolled frantically past the comments. I knew she was trouble. The lights are insane. They blind me every January. I paid $800 for a mailbox post. She should pay her $20K. Then she saw the latest update, a photo of Ellie's sign posted by one of the anonymous accounts captioned, The truth lives here. Time for a vote of no confidence. Bev dialed Ellie's number, but it went straight to voicemail. She redialed 3 times, her fury mounting. She couldn't believe this woman had the audacity to not only defy her, but to expose her personal failings to the staff and the neighbors. You think you're so clever, Mrs. Vance? Bev hissed into the dead phone. You just guaranteed the lien. You're going to lose that house. She called her personal attorney, Marcus Thorne, a slick corporate defense lawyer who usually handled her husband's minor real estate disputes. Marcus, I have an emergency. I need a cease and desist order immediately against a woman who is slandering me in public and violating the covenants. Beverly, what exactly is the slander? Marcus asked, clearly annoyed at the early call. She put up a sign that says I threatened to take her house. And she's lying about a fine I owe. Do you have a lien filed on her property, Bev? Well, I just filed the notice of impending action yesterday, yes, but the actual lien process takes a few days, you know that. And do you owe the HOA money for a violation? Specifically, Section 501, the holiday lights. Bev paused, the air escaping her lungs. It's a technicality, Marcus. They're high-end permanent fixtures. They blend in. Bev, if she has proof that you are $20,000 delinquent and you are simultaneously threatening to foreclose on a military spouse for $5,000, filing a C&D will just make us look worse. We need to get ahead of the board response. The phrase board response hit Bev with the force of a physical blow. She realized the certified letters had reached her peers. Chapter 7. The Unanimous Demand. Meanwhile, at the independent HOA Management Services office across town, board members Richard Davies and Mrs. Helena Chen sat side by side, reviewing the thick packet of certified documents Ellie had submitted. Davies, a meticulous accountant who had tolerated Bev's excesses for years, pushed his glasses up his nose. "Helena, do you see this?" Mrs. Vance is correct on every procedural point. Bev violated the cure period. She acted unilaterally on the lien threat, and she used her position to target the woman. Chen, a sharp-tongued retired school principal, tapped a manicured finger on the fine sheet showing Bev's accrued balance. The Class 3 white oak removal. That's a $10,000 fine in itself, Richard, for the environmental impact and lack of ARB sign-off. Combined with the daily compounding fine for the lights since January 16th, $50 a day for 257 days, Davies scribbled quickly. That's $12,850 plus the tree. We are looking at a minimum $22,850 debt owed to the association by the president while she's trying to seize a house over $5,000. He looked up, his face pale. We're liable, Helena. The community is on fire, and if a lawyer gets involved, we're all facing deposition. We need an immediate vote, Chen stated, her voice tight with urgency. Not on Vance, on Bev. Davies nodded, pulling out his phone to call the management company's CEO. We're invoking Article 1004, Emergency Action of the Board. We are calling an unscheduled executive session this evening to address a critical violation of fiduciary duty and egregious procedural abuse by the president. The management CEO, already fielding dozens of frantic, irate calls from preserve residents about the sign, immediately agreed. They had a massive PR crisis on their hands, and the only way to contain it was to isolate Beverly Sterling. The agenda was simple. Vote to temporarily suspend the executive authority of the board president, pending a full financial and procedural audit. Chapter 8. The Strategy Session Ellie's home became the silent center of the revolution. That evening, shielded from the street by their detached garage, she hosted a small, intense meeting with a handful of trusted neighbors. Mr. Henderson, whose prize-winning rosebush had been fined, Mrs. Ortiz, whose paint color had been rejected twice, and two other military spouses, Sarah and Jessica. Bev's response will be panic and escalation, Ellie explained, laying out copies of the CC&Rs and Bev's aggressive response letter. She's tried to make the fine official by filing the notice of impending action today, which means she intends to execute the lien. Mr. Henderson shook his head. She's trying to bankrupt you to save her own face. Exactly, Ellie agreed. But her strength is also her weakness. She only uses the rules selectively. My certified letters forced the two non-Bev board members, Davies and Chen, to look at her actual balance. Sarah, a petite woman whose husband was also deployed, leaned forward. So what's our next move? Do we get a lawyer? Not yet, Ellie said firmly. That's her territory, and it costs us money we don't have. Our power is in numbers and documentation. Phase 3 is official, massive community dissent. I need you all to file formal complaints, not just social media posts, about your fines, citing Bev's hypocrisy. She handed each person a template. We petition for a special meeting of the membership, SMM. It takes a petition signed by 10% of the membership to force the board to hold a vote to recall its officers. That's about 30 homes in the preserve. We can get 30 signatures by noon tomorrow, Mrs. Ortiz stated, her eyes gleaming. Everyone hates her, Ellie. They were just too scared to move. Fear stops now, Ellie said. We use the momentum from the driveway sign. Every signature is a nail in her political coffin. The petition goes to Davies and Chen. It gives them the leverage they need to vote her out without looking like they're just settling a personal grudge. Jessica, who worked in real estate, pulled up the county clerk's website on her tablet. Ellie, the official notice of impending action, Bev's lien threat, it was just processed. It's public record now. Ellie nodded, unconcerned. Good. That makes this a public documented injustice. It's what we needed for the final play. Chapter 9. The executive session was called for 7:30 p.m. in a sterile conference room at the Management Services office. Only board members and the management CEO were present. Bev arrived 10 minutes late, radiating hostile energy. She tossed her purse on the table and glared at Davies and Chen. Let's dispense with this frivolous meeting. We have a clear act of defiance on our hands, a grotesque sign in the street, and a community being stirred up by a highly unstable military wife. I move that we formally execute the lien on the Vance property tonight and hire outside counsel to sue Mrs. Vance for libel. Davies cleared his throat, pushing a stack of printed CC&R pages across the table toward Bev. Beverly, that motion is out of order. This meeting was called under Article 7.04 to address a crisis of leadership. A crisis she created, Bev shouted, pointing at Chen. Chen ignored her, sliding a professionally printed spreadsheet onto the table, the one Davies had meticulously prepared. Beverly, this document is a preliminary internal accounting review. Since January 16th, the daily compounding fine of $50 for the holiday lighting violation at 2850 Laurel Lane, which remains uncorrected, totals $12,150. We have not even calculated the interest. Bev froze, her face turning a mottled red. That is confidential, and a gross exaggeration. It's the covenant, Beverly, Davies interjected, his voice firm. And this is the documentation regarding the unauthorized removal. The local news segment, which aired at 6 a.m. and repeated throughout the morning, transformed the neighborhood dispute into a national talking point. The story wasn't just local news. It was syndicated by several major outlets because it hit a perfect trifecta of cultural flashpoints: military families, HOA tyranny, and gross hypocrisy. The footage of the Marine Corps red sign centered on Ilara Vance's driveway, juxtaposed with B-roll of Beverly Sterling's garishly lit permanent Christmas display, was devastating. The anchor. In a stunning display of administrative overreach, the president of the preserve at Willow Creek HOA, Beverly Sterling, attempted to levy a $5,000 fine and a threat of foreclosure against the wife of a deployed U.S. Marine. The dispute? A small temporary storage cabinet housing military readiness gear. Richard Davies, on camera. The board took immediate action to freeze the fine and suspend the president's authority following evidence of procedural violation and significant ongoing financial delinquency on the president's part. We apologize to Mrs. Vance and her family. The segment concluded with a close-up of the sign, highlighting the line, "Rules for thee, but not for me." Ilara watched the segment with a strange, detached calm. The publicity was working exactly as planned. It neutralized Bev's ability to act silently and forced the board to move swiftly. Her phone, which she had kept powered down, began vibrating relentlessly once she turned it back on. Reporters, family support groups, and dozens of angry neighbors wanted to speak to her. She fielded the essential calls. To the military support groups, she was measured and strategic. We need community action. We must use the CC&Rs to ensure this never happens to another family. To the reporters, she stuck to the facts. This isn't about me. It's about fiduciary responsibility. When you're deployed, your spouse is your home front. If that home front is attacked, the entire family structure is at risk. By noon, the special meeting of the membership SMM petition was filed with the management company. Ilara's small group of allies had gathered 65 signatures, more than double the required 10% of the membership. The message was unmistakable. The community demanded Beverly Sterling's permanent removal. Chapter 12. The Desperate Defense. Beverly Sterling was not seen outside her home. She was in seclusion, but she was not idle. Stripped of the power of the HOA, she turned to the only weapon she had left: her husband's substantial wealth and her personal attorney, Marcus Thorne. Thorne, looking deeply uncomfortable, sat in Bev's opulent living room, surrounded by untouched mahogany furniture and the faint, lingering scent of expensive holiday potpourri. "Beverly, the social media sentiment is a $100,000 problem," Thorne sighed, tapping a pencil against the latest legal filing. "Your suspension is valid. Davies and Chen have the evidence of your delinquency. Your only path now is to discredit Mrs. Vance and the 2 board members." "Then do it," Bev snapped, her eyes hollowed by lack of sleep and relentless fury. "Sue them, all of them, for conspiracy to defraud the HOA, for defamation. Make their lives a living hell, Marcus. We can't sue the HOA for fraud when you owe them $22,850, Thorne countered flatly. "But we can file a personal action. I've drafted a lawsuit naming Richard Davies and Helena Chen for breach of fiduciary duty, alleging they disclosed confidential financial information to a resident, Mrs. Vance to facilitate an illegal coup, and Ilara Vance." Thorne tapped the file. "We'll hit her with a slap suit, strategic lawsuit against public participation. We accuse her of slander and intentional infliction of emotional distress, IIED, for the sign and the social media campaign. It won't win, but it will force her to hire a lawyer and spend money she doesn't have. It will tie her up for months." A cold, vicious smile spread across Bev's face. "The military wife will pay for a lawyer while her husband is gone. Perfect. Do it now, Marcus. I want those papers served on Mrs. Vance this afternoon. Make sure the process server is aggressive." Thorne nodded, already mentally calculating his billable hours. "Understood. But Beverly, you have to attend the SMM meeting. If you don't show up, the recall is instantaneous." "You must defend yourself." Bev stood up, her jaw clenched. "Oh, I'll be there, Marcus. But I won't be using HOA rules to fight her. I'll be using something much more effective." Chapter 13. The Black Channel. While Thorne prepared the legal assault, Bev initiated her most poisonous attack. She couldn't touch Ilara's house, but she knew exactly where to strike a deployed Marine wife: the husband's career and safety. Bev possessed a highly sophisticated, if morally dubious, network. Her brother-in-law was a retired colonel who worked as a defense contractor. She called him, circumventing Thorne and the HOA entirely. "I need a favor, Charles. A big one." She painted a fabricated story. Ilara Vance was unstable, having a complete mental breakdown under the stress of deployment. She claimed the sign was proof of extreme behavior, alleging that Ilara was endangering her children and making false, libelous accusations against community leaders, potentially damaging the morale of the local base. "I need you to send an anonymous, official-looking complaint to the readiness officer at Camp Lejeune," Bev instructed, her voice low and persuasive. "State that Gunnery Sergeant Vance's family is suffering from a severe, unmanaged psychological crisis that may require a compassionate reassignment or emergency return due to the extreme instability of the home front." Charles, uncomfortable but unwilling to cross his brother's wife, reluctantly complied. Within 2 hours, a carefully crafted, unsigned email using contractor letterhead and official-sounding jargon landed in the inbox of the family readiness coordinator at Gunny Vance's command. The goal was not to bring him home. It was to introduce chaos, doubt, and the devastating possibility of a forced return that would label the gunnery sergeant's family as a liability. It was a black channel attack on a military spouse's most vital resource: her reputation for stability. Chapter 14. The Recall Vote. The special meeting of the membership, SMM, was held in the cavernous, impersonal ballroom of the local Marriott, the only venue large enough to accommodate the unprecedented turnout. Over 200 residents of the preserve were present. Richard Davies chaired the meeting, his face pale but determined. The agenda was brief and brutal. Vote to recall and permanently remove HOA President Beverly Sterling. Bev arrived with Marcus Thorne, who sat beside her, radiating legal menace. Ellie arrived alone, carrying a single worn binder of documents. Davies read the charge. The board finds that Mrs. Sterling has engaged in procedural violations of the CC&Rs, including the unauthorized filing of a lien threat against a property and a severe breach of fiduciary duty due to the non-payment of over $22,000 in accrued fines. The floor was opened for testimony. Ellie was the first and only person Davies called. She approached the microphone, ignoring Bev and Thorne. She didn't shout or cry. She spoke with the clear, steady voice of someone delivering a mission briefing. "I didn't want to be here," Ellie began, her voice echoing in the hall. "I asked for a simple waiver for a storage cabinet required by my husband's deployment. But when I was targeted and my family's home was threatened with foreclosure, I had two choices: surrender or fight back." She presented her evidence calmly: the initial violation notice, Bev's response letter, and the county lion filing. "This isn't just about a shed," she said, looking directly at the residents. "It's about power without accountability. My fine was $5,000. President Sterling's outstanding fine for a permanent years-long violation of holiday lights is now over $23,000. When the rules only apply to the people she chooses to intimidate, the entire community is unstable." She finished by holding up a copy of the lawsuit she had been served just hours before. "Hours ago, I was served with a lawsuit for defamation by Mrs. Sterling, a legal action designed to silence me and bankrupt my family. This is her final tactic, using the threat of personal ruin to avoid accountability to you, the members who pay the dues." A collective gasp went through the room. Bev, seeing the meeting slip away, snatched the microphone. "This is propaganda! This woman is unhinged! She used her husband's service to slander me. She is the one bringing chaos to our neighborhood. You are being manipulated by a conspiracy. You can't let a military wife use her tragedy as a shield." Her voice cracked, descending into a desperate, tearful plea. But it was too late. Her display of malice, followed by her desperate self-pity, solidified the community's resolve. The vote was called. It was a simple show of hands. When Davies asked for all those in favor of the recall, the vast majority of the room's hands shot up. Bev's face went white. "The motion passes," Davies announced, his voice thick with relief. "Beverly Sterling is immediately and permanently removed as president, and from the board of directors of the Preserve at Willow Creek." Chapter 15, The Ray. Red Cross message Bev and Thorne were quickly escorted out of the room amid a torrent of satisfied, angry murmurs. Ellie was instantly surrounded by neighbors, hugging her, thanking her, and offering to pay her legal fees. She had won. The war was over. Ellie felt the tension drain from her body, leaving her exhausted but triumphant. She had protected her home and liberated her neighborhood. She was gathering her papers when her phone, which she had kept on silent vibrate, showed an incoming call. It was a familiar, unwelcome number. Ilara's world shrunk from the political theater of the HOA meeting to the cold, fluorescent reality of the Family Readiness Office at Camp Lejeune. She was fighting a ghost, an anonymous high-level contractor report claiming her instability was a risk to national security and child welfare. Beverly Sterling had aimed for the one target. Ilara could not fortify her husband's career and reputation. Ellie spent the night organizing a new binder, the Black Channel Binder. It contained the timeline of the conflict, starting with the $5,000 fine, Bev's military wives comment, the filing of the illegal lien, the local news coverage of the injustice, the successful recall petition, the SMM meeting minutes proving Bev's removal, and the final piece of evidence, the slap suit for defamation. Filed hours after the recall, at 7 a.m., she sat in the office of Major Henderson, a legal officer assigned to the case. Henderson was a sharp, skeptical man who had clearly seen every deployment drama play out. "Mrs. Vance, command must take these Red Cross inputs seriously," Major Henderson stated, resting his hands on the large mahogany desk. Two separate, well-sourced communications cited significant emotional distress and the term child safety. "I have a gunnery sergeant sitting at a fob, mission scrubbed. waiting for a ruling that could result in an immediate medevac home under a status that effectively ends his path to promotion. We need concrete proof that these allegations are malicious, not just the usual deployment friction. Major, I understand the policy, but look at the timeline, Ellie said, sliding the black channel binder across the desk. The crisis was manufactured. The Black Channel reports arrived after I successfully mobilized the community to recall Ms. Sterling for financial fraud and abuse of power. Ms. Sterling was removed as president last night. She retaliated hours later by filing a meritless lawsuit against me, and simultaneously initiated this Red Cross action to damage my husband's career. She opened the binder to the photograph of the red sign on her driveway. She labeled the gear of a deployed Marine a blight and threatened foreclosure. When she lost her power, she weaponized the term child safety. This is not a crisis. It is organized retaliation by a powerful, deposed individual trying to leverage her contractor connections to inflict professional harm. Henderson remained silent, flipping through the documents. He paused at the minutes detailing Bev's $22,150 delinquency. The sheer scale of Bev's documented hypocrisy was a powerful counter-narrative. "The defamation suit," Henderson murmured, tapping the legal filing. "She served you with this after the recall vote?" "Yes, sir." "It proves her state of mind. She lost the civic battle, so she launched the legal and military sabotage campaigns. I need the command to recognize this as a hostile information operation, not a legitimate welfare check." Henderson closed the binder. "I will present this to the commander, Mrs. Vance. We will arrange a secure video teleconference with the gunny today. But until the commander officially retracts the flag, his mission status remains unstable." Chapter 17. Mobilizing the Lawyers. Leaving the base, Ellie's mind shifted immediately to the SLAP suit. She couldn't fight a wealthy woman's legal team alone. She drove to the office of the nonprofit organization that handled pro bono legal aid for military families in high-profile cases. She was met by Clara Jennings, a battle-hardened attorney in her 50s who specialized in complex civil litigation. Clara listened to the entire story, her expression moving from mild interest to outright professional outrage. "This is a classic slap," Clara declared, slamming the lawsuit document shut. "It's designed to harass, intimidate, and drain your bank account. It has no merit. Your sign was a statement of documented fact in a public dispute. But we won't just move to dismiss it, Ellie. We're going to use it." Clara leaned forward. "This is not just defamation. This is malicious prosecution and intentional infliction of emotional distress, IIED. Bev targeted your home, threatened foreclosure, and now, critically, she has directly interfered with a federal employee's career and safety using fraudulent anonymous reports. That is a massive legal exposure." "But I don't have the money for a massive legal exposure," Ellie admitted, rubbing her temples. "You won't need it," Clara assured her. "Between the media coverage and the clear evidence of retaliation, this is a pro bono gold mine. We are filing a counterclaim and an anti-SLAP motion. We will request the court immediately dismiss her suit and then sanction her for bad faith. But more importantly, we will start discovery on her before her suit is dismissed." "Discovery?" "Yes," Clara smiled, a predator's glint in her eye. "We are going to subpoena her bank records, her email communications with her brother-in-law Charles, and all her personal correspondence regarding the HOA. We are going to expose the depth of her malice and tie the lawsuit directly to the military sabotage. We will force her to prove that your mental crisis was real. When she can't, the damages for IIED and malicious prosecution will be substantial. We will pursue her for everything she has." Ellie felt a surge of strength. She had found her own strategic weapon, a lawyer with zero fear and limitless leverage. Chapter 18. The firing line on the other side of the world. In a stifling, secure compound, Gunnery Sergeant Rick Vance sat in front of a heavily encrypted monitor. He was furious. His mission, the culmination of months of intense training and planning, had been put on indefinite hold. He had been pulled from his team, a professional disgrace. The debriefing was terse. Rick listened to the vague accusations of home front instability, and child safety concerns. His jaw tight. "Sir, with all due respect, my wife is the most squared-away woman I know," Rick told the senior officer present. "She handles 2 kids, 2 mortgages, and a high-stress deployment with 0 complaints. If there's chaos, it was manufactured by the HOA president she just successfully had recalled. I request immediate clearance to return to my unit." The command was hesitant, citing the high-level contractor warning. Then, Major Henderson's contact from Lejeune chimed in, displaying Ellie's Black Channel binder contents on the screen. Rick watched the documents flash by. The $22,150 fine against Bev, the minutes of the SMM meeting, the news report, and the copy of the slap suit. The cold, irrefutable evidence of a legal and political feud. "Gunny Vance," the commander said finally. "We believe the Red Cross message was generated under false pretenses. This is confirmed as a hostile, civilian-originated attempt at interference. However, the optics remain. The mission is high visibility. We cannot risk the perception of instability." Rick waited, tense. "What is the verdict, sir?" "The compassionate emergency return is retracted, but you are temporarily relieved of this combat mission due to the disruption. You will be assigned to a logistics and training role at the FOB for the next 3 weeks until the rotation. We can't send you back to the front line now." It was a devastating compromise. He was safe but sidelined. The stain would linger. Then the commander's tone softened. "Your wife is cleared to contact you now, Gunny. Secure line." Chapter 19. Face to face. Across the world. The screen cleared, and there was Ellie, looking exhausted but fiercely composed. Rick's heart ached. "Ellie, what the hell did you do?" he asked, not in anger, but in disbelief at the sheer scale of the battle she had won, and the battle she was now fighting for him. "I won the house." "Honey," she whispered, a tear finally tracking a path down her cheek. "I got her thrown out, but she tried to ruin your career." "I'm so sorry, Rick. You did what you had to do," he assured her, his voice rough. "Don't apologize. She messed with the wrong Marine wife. We'll fix the career damage later. What about the lawsuit? That slap suit?" "I have a lawyer, Clara Jennings." "Pro bono," Ellie said, a flicker of her old fire returning. "She's filing a massive counterclaim today for malicious prosecution and IIED, connecting the lawsuit to the fraudulent Red Cross report. We're going after her personal assets, Rick. We are going to bankrupt her to pay for the damage she did to your mission." While they spoke, thousands of miles away, Bev Sterling sat in her home, holding the certified letter from the management company. It was short and final. Demand for payment, $22,850. Due in 14 days. Failure to comply will result in the execution of the existing county lien and legal action to force sale of property. The new board, Davies and Chen, had acted with ruthless speed. Bev was now on the receiving end of her own favorite weapon. She called Thorne, her voice frantic. "Marcus, the HOA is trying to seize my assets. They're executing the fine. I need you to file an injunction." "I can't, Beverly," Thorne said, his tone detached and final. "You were officially recalled. Your debt is valid. I've also just been served with Mrs. Vance's counterclaim. It's an anti-slap suit, and they are seeking punitive damages, linking your Red Cross report to the lawsuit. They are coming after everything." Thorne paused. "My retainer is exhausted, Beverly, and I advise you to retain counsel specializing in criminal defense if the military chooses to pursue the fraudulent reporting issue. I am withdrawing from your case." The line went dead. Bev was alone, facing the financial and legal fallout of her obsession. She looked around her opulent, perfectly decorated living room, the room she had fought so hard to protect with fines and rules. Chapter 20. The Unwinding. A week later, the Vance household had achieved a fragile new stability. The red sign was gone, the say. Beverly Sterling awoke to a silence that felt oppressive and absolute. Her fortress, the perfectly designed house on Laurel Lane, now felt hollow. The morning light filtering through the plantation shutters revealed the permanent holiday lights still stubbornly affixed to the eaves, a $23,000 monument to her own hubris. Her phone was dead. having finally succumbed to hours of unanswered, desperate calls to Thorne, her now-arrested brother-in-law Charles, and the management company. She had no power, no allies, and a $22,150 lien threat looming over her head. A sudden sharp knock on the front door jarred her. It wasn't the delivery person or a solicitor. It was an urgent, official sound. She peered through the frosted glass. Standing on her pristine HOA-compliant porch were two men, one in a plain gray suit carrying a briefcase, and the other, surprisingly, was David Sterling, her husband. David, usually impeccably dressed in custom corporate attire, looked tired, his face a mask of cold managerial fury. She opened the door just enough to slide out. "David, what are you doing here? Did you fix this? Did you call our friends at the bank?" David didn't meet her eyes. He stepped back slightly, allowing the man in the gray suit to step forward. The man held out a folded document. "Beverly Sterling," the man said, his voice flat. "You have been served." "I am Mr. Allen of Sullivan and Hayes. This is a petition for dissolution of marriage, citing irreconcilable differences, filed on behalf of my client, David Sterling." The world tilted. The document felt heavy and cold in her hand. Dissolution. David finally looked at her, and his gaze was purely transactional. "I've retained the best counsel, Beverly. They will handle everything from here. I cannot afford to have my career damaged by an HOA feud, legal sanctions, and the fallout of Charles's arrest. This is a liability mitigation strategy. We're filing immediately to protect my assets from your inevitable legal judgment." My legal judgment?" Beverly stammered, clutching the papers. "David, I did this for us. To protect the property values. My house, your investment. You threatened foreclosure on a Marine's family. Were recalled in a landslide, accrued a $22,850 debt, and now face a massive punitive lawsuit for malicious prosecution and IIED, David said, his voice quiet and deadly calm. "And you got my primary defense contractor arrested, which jeopardizes my firm's upcoming bid. This house, Beverly, is collateral damage. I'm minimizing my losses." He removed his wedding ring, placing it carefully on a small marble table by the door. "I've instructed my lawyer to ensure you receive a generous settlement, provided you agree to a clean, rapid divorce and sign a legal waiver absolving me of any responsibility for your outstanding HOA debt and the Vance civil suit judgment. I expect your signed acceptance by tomorrow afternoon." He turned on his heel, getting into a waiting black SUV without another word. Beverly stood in the doorway, the divorce papers trembling in her hands, her life dissolving faster than the morning fog. She had spent a year trying to destroy Elara Vance's home, only to have her own life professionally and maritally dismantled in a single night of karmic retribution. Chapter 22. The Final Sight. The next day, Elara was at the local bakery picking up treats for her kids. She was tired but smiling. The anti-slap dismissal had brought immense relief, and the constant calls from the base had stopped. Rick's career was salvaged, though she knew the assignment change stung him deeply. As she stepped out onto the sidewalk, she saw the Lexus. Beverly Sterling's pearl-white vehicle was parked illegally across the sidewalk. Hazard lights flashing, a final careless violation. Beverly was sitting inside, talking on her phone, looking drastically different. Her impeccable composure had fractured. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and her expensive clothes looked rumpled. She wasn't wearing her usual array of diamond rings. Their eyes met across the parking lot. It was not a glare of hostility, but a shared, devastating moment of recognition. Elara didn't flinch. She simply paused, allowing Beverly to register the presence of the woman who had single-handedly orchestrated her downfall. Elara's expression was neutral, not triumphant but firm, reflecting the profound, hard-won knowledge of the consequences Beverly now faced. Bev, however, couldn't hold the gaze. She looked away first, turning back to the window, her phone pressed tightly to her ear. The fear and isolation were palpable. She had lost everything. Elara continued to her car, opened the door, and secured the pastries. She didn't gloat because she realized the war had been won with documents, not shouting. Beverly Sterling was now reduced to a defeated, desperate woman, and Elara had moved on. The small, temporary structure that started the war was sitting legally and approved on the side of her house. Chapter 23. The unwinding of the fortress. Clara Jennings called Ilara 2 days later with the final, definitive news regarding the civil suit. "Ellie, we don't have to go to trial," Clara said. "David Sterling's lawyers have contacted us. They want to settle the malicious prosecution and IIED counterclaim before we even start discovery. They are terrified of what we'll find in Bev's communications regarding Charles's arrest and the Red Cross reports." "What are the terms?" Ellie asked, her heart racing. "The terms are simple and complete," Clara replied. "First, Beverly Sterling must issue a written, signed and notarized statement to the HOA, the command at Camp Lejeune, and the court, retracting every single claim of home front instability, child safety concern, and mental distress against you, fully absolving Rick's military record of any professional stain related to this incident. Second, she will pay you $75,000 in punitive damages to be drawn from her portion of the marital assets. Third, she must sell her home immediately to cover the HOA's $22,150 fine, the court sanctions, and the outstanding mortgage before the HOA executes their lien." Ellie closed her eyes. It was total victory. Her husband's name was cleared, her legal fees were paid, and Beverly was forced to pay restitution and forfeit the house she cherished above all else. "Accept the settlement, Clara," Ellie said softly, "and please draft a letter to Major Henderson at the base to ensure that retraction is placed in Rick's permanent file immediately." Chapter 24. Restoration and moving on. Within 2 months, the house on Laurel Lane was sold, its sale price barely covering the debt, the sanctions, and the emergency settlement. The new owners, a quiet, friendly couple, immediately requested permission to take down the permanent holiday lights. The new board, now led by Richard Davies, unanimously approved the removal. The preserve at Willow Creek, having purged its toxic leadership, was slowly returning to a state of relative, transparent calm. The $75,000 check sat in Ilara's bank account. She didn't buy anything extravagant. Instead, she used the money to pay off the remaining balance of the second mortgage on their home, the mortgage Rick had taken out to cover military moving costs years ago. She finally had true financial peace. She drove to the base one last time, meeting Major Henderson to receive a copy of Beverly Sterling's signed retraction and the official memo confirming the removal of the professional stain on Gunnery Sergeant Vance's record. "Mrs. Vance," Major Henderson said, handing her the documents. "The general personally reviewed this. He said this situation showed the absolute strength of the military family. Your tenacity saved your husband from a career-ending administrative headache. You fought this like a professional. You should be proud." Chapter 25. A quiet victory. A month later, Rick was home. His deployment was over. His unit rotated back to Lejeune, and his record was clean. He was tired, but safe. That evening, they sat on their back porch, the setting sun warming their faces. The grass was green, the hedges were trimmed, and the 4x4 storage cabinet was tucked quietly against the side of the house, invisible, approved, and forgotten. Rick reached out and took Ilara's hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "You know, the guys back at the FOB started calling you Gunny Ellie," he murmured, a smile touching his lips. "They said you fought the HOA like a well-executed counterinsurgency operation. You won the high ground with information, mobilized the locals, and took out the command structure." Ilara leaned her head on his shoulder, the exhaustion finally catching up to her, but the anxiety gone. "I was just defending the perimeter." "Rick, you teach me your rules, I use them." "Well, you definitely taught her a lesson about consequences," Rick said. "It wasn't me." "Really?" Ilara said, looking up at the clear, unlit sky. It was the system she thought she was above. She didn't respect the rules, she didn't respect the community, and she definitely didn't respect the home front. She messed with the wrong house, and the house fought back. She squeezed his hand, listening to the peaceful suburban evening sounds. There was no more screaming on the phone, no more certified letters, and no more malicious threats. Just the quiet hum of a secured, debt-free home.